Je tire ma mère et puis on continue. Le convoi était parti déjà. Le soir, ça arrive. Tout le long de la chemin, c'est plein de gens. Et demain, quand je me réveille, je dis, ma mère, il reste pas, je dis, je vais aller voir si le convoi est parti déjà, on voit pas du tout. Je vais aller voir s'il y a de l'eau par là. Alors j'ai laissé ma mère là-bas.
The Caucasus, May 28, 1918. An independent Armenia is born. A destitute country in ruins and blood-drained, struggling with little help from any of the Western powers. The future of Armenia was to be, henceforth, played out around the conference tables. In August of 1920, the Sèvres Peace Treaty is signed between Turkey and the Allies, recognizing by virtue of Articles 88 and 89 the existence of an independent Armenia within borders to be determined by the President of the United States. On November 22, 1920, President Wilson establishes the borders of Armenia to include the provinces of Van, Erzurum, Bitlis, and Trebizond. The Allies, however, have not foreseen ways of ensuring the implementation of the Treaty of Sèvres. Mustafa Kemal, head of the Turkish national movement, refuses to abide by this treaty. Opposed to the creation of Armenia, he launches an offensive of 60,000 men against the newly formed republic. Mustafa Kemal's refusal to compromise pays off. At the Lausanne Conference, faced with the obstinacy of the Ankara delegation, the Allies make concession after concession. And at the July 23rd signing of the peace treaty, which replaces that of Sèvres, the Kemalists appear to be the victors. Armenia is erased from the map of Turkey. According to consecutive Turkish governments, there never was a genocide. If the deportations of 1915 to 1917 are acknowledged at all, they are justified by military reasons. The Turks have never accepted their criminal responsibility. To the contrary, Turkey continues its plan of extermination, and the Armenian genocide continues. Today, there are 7 million Armenians dispersed worldwide, half of whom live in Soviet Armenia, while 600,000 live in other republics of the Soviet Union. 500,000 form the Middle Eastern diaspora, mainly in Lebanon, Syria, and Iran. 400,000 live in Europe, mostly in France. Of the 750,000 in the Americas, most dwell in Canada and the United States. For more than 50 years, the Armenian people have mourned their martyred brethren and the loss of their homeland. Beginning in 1965, a new generation rises to organize massive protests against the denials of the genocide. They succeed in gaining worldwide attention for the Armenian cause. In 1971, the UN Human Rights Commission designates an expert to study the repression and prevention of genocide. The 1973 interim report of that study includes in paragraph 30 a reference to the Armenian genocide. In April 1984, The People's Permanent Tribunal, which includes among its members a number of Nobel Peace Prize recipients, pronounces the following sentence.
The extermination of the Armenian population groups through deportation and massacre constitutes a crime of genocide not subject to statutory limitations within the definition of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide of December 9, 1948. With respect to the condemnation of this crime, the aforesaid convention is declaratory of existing law in that it takes note of rules which were already in force at the time of the incriminated acts. The Young Turk government is guilty of this genocide with regard to the acts perpetrated between 1915 and 1917. The Armenian genocide is also an international crime for which the Turkish state must assume responsibility without using the pretext of any discontinuity in the existence of the state to elude that responsibility. This responsibility implies first and foremost the obligation to recognize officially the reality of this genocide and the consequent damages suffered by the Armenian people. The United Nations organization and each of its members have the right to demand this recognition and to assist the Armenian people to that end.
In 1990, the Quebec National Assembly acknowledges the 75th anniversary of the commemoration of the Armenian Genocide in these terms. A similar resolution was adopted by the Ontario Legislative Assembly. In spite of the recognition accorded by these international instances, Canada has yet to recognize the Armenian genocide. And so, in the political arena, the Armenians of Canada and throughout the world await the justice that is their due. On a cultural level, Armenians continue to suffer irreversible losses. In the occupied Armenian territories, the Turkish government is illegally confiscating and methodically destroying Armenian historical monuments, some dating to the 1st century before Christ, vestiges of an indigenous civilization, tangible proof of the Armenians' right to the region. The threat to a peaceful existence for the Armenian nation is more real than ever today. The anti-Armenian pogroms of Sumgait, Kirovohrad, and Baku by the Azeri Turks in 1988 and 89, and the attacks, persecutions, and deportations of villages in the Karabakh in the spring of 1991 not only evoke the heinous deeds of the years 1915 to 1923, but also perpetuate the pan-Turanistic ideals put forth by the Young Turks. The long, ongoing struggle of the Armenian people demonstrates a determination to exist, to safeguard national identity, and to secure the acknowledgement of their inalienable rights for justice and self-determination. It will not end without the return of the Armenian people to their ancestral lands at the foot of Mount Ararat, witness to a time-honored existence.